Alright, so this is going to be the Chapter 3, Learning Target number 6 and 7 video. So these two targets we put together because obviously it's all about division. Now here's the difference between the two because they look very similar because you see a lot of the same words. Here's the big difference. Up here, we're just talking about multi-digit numbers. Down here, we're talking about decimals. So there's a little bit different process down here. So let's start up here first. Okay? So this video might be a little bit longer because division is something that we really struggle with. As a sixth grade, I feel like this is something that we're not as good with. Now remember, the first number is the dividend. The dividend is always the number that goes on the inside. So there we go. Now I apologize if I didn't give you enough room. Try your best. I really am sorry. I try to, when I'm doing this, it's kind of hard to tell. It doesn't matter, but I do apologize for that. There is one way to remember this, and maybe you've learned this, but it's does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? Maybe you've heard that. If you haven't, I'm going to relate it back to that a couple times. It's kind of one of those mnemonic devices again, kind of like PEMDAS or something like that, mode, most, things like that. So um, we have to figure out how many times 5 will go into 3. Another way to say that is 3 divided by 5. So this D stands for divide. Okay? So 3 can't be divided by 5. We know that that's just the fraction 3/5, right, guys? 3 divided by 5 is the fraction 3/5. So we know that that can't be. So we can't get a whole amount of 5 doesn't go into 3 at all. It goes in partial amounts of time. Okay? So this is where it's very important. Okay? Don't write what I'm about to write. Do not write this. Okay? Because we got to go to the next digit. And then you say, okay, 36 divided by 5. Or another way to say it is how many times will 5 go into 36? Now, I'll just go ahead and tell you that it's 7 times because 7 times 5 is 35. But this is the mistake, so do not write this. A lot of people put the 7 right there. Now, by putting the 7 right there, you're saying that 5 goes into 3 7 times. You have to be very neat with long division. It's very important to keep everything kind of the same, in the same spot. It's very important for place values and decimal placements and all that. Okay? So that is why a lot of your elementary teachers either taught you to put a 0 there. Some of them taught you to put a 0. Some taught you to put an X, which I'm fine with. I don't care what you guys do. Whatever helps you to remember. Another way, the way that I do it most of the time, is I just say, okay, if I'm asking how many times 5 will go into 36, then I'm going to put that 7 above the last digit in whatever number I was talking about. 36, I'm going to put it right there. So that's the divide step. Now we're on to the multiply step. So we're going to take this and we're going to multiply it around. 7 times 5 is 35. Okay, now we're on the subtract step. So we're going to subtract 36 minus 35. And that's going to give us 1. Okay? Now we're on the check step. Very important step right here. Okay, it'll save you a lot of time. So I'm going to try to make sure we do this every time. The check step just says make sure when you subtract, this number after you subtract has to be smaller than your divisor. It has to, or you did something wrong. If I got 6 when I subtracted, that means that this number right here has to go up 1. Okay? So just keep that in mind that you got to check. You always got to have something smaller. It has to be smaller than your divisor. Okay? Now we're on to B. That is going to stand for bring down. Hopefully you're writing this little mnemonic device. Does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? So you see where the letters come from. Okay? Now we're ready to bring down. If there's anything to bring down, we're going to bring down a 5. 5 then goes into 15. After we've brought down, we go back up here to step number 1 again. 5 goes into 15 3 times. Or another way to say it is 15 divided by 5 is 3. Same thing. Then we're going to multiply 3 times 5. And there's where we get 0. We do not have to go farther with this because we don't have to add a decimal or 0 or anything because it terminated. It ended with a 0. Okay? So we are done with that problem. Now, if I want to check my work, what I can do is if I do 73 times 5, shouldn't that give me 365? Hopefully you're all nodding yes at the computer screen because absolutely it has to give you that. So that's just a little check method that you can use. Let's go to the next one here. Now we're going to do 1,440 goes on the inside. That's the dividend. and we're going to be dividing that by 30. Okay. Can 30 be, or can 1 be divided by 30? No. Can 30 go into 14? No. Can 30 go into 144? Yes. So that means if you were taught to put x's there, you'd put x's above 1 and 4 because it wouldn't go into those. Okay? So, or zeros or whatever, or just leave them blank. Now, a lot of you just start going off and start going, okay, 30 times 2, 30 times 3, 30 times 4, 30 times 5, and you just start doing that over and over until you find the correct answer. Now, that is correct. That will work, but it's time consuming. So this is where we're going to use rounding. Okay? 30 is really close to 30. Obviously, it is 30. Okay? 144, let's just say it's really close to 140. Okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to take off those zeros because you can always do that. Okay? And then I'm going to say, okay, 3 goes into 14 4 times. Okay? Now, you know that I'm not saying that every time, whatever you get right there in that little rounding step, it's going to automatically be correct. This kind of would tell you that it's going to be somewhere either 4 or 5. Okay, so that just gives you like a place to start. So you don't have to do 30 times 2, times 3, times 6, times 7. You just start at random spots. You just can kind of get an idea of where to start. Now we're going to multiply. 4 times 30, well, 4 times 3 is 12, and then I just add on that 0. That gives me 120. Okay, that's the multiply step. Now we're going on to subtract. When I subtract this, I'm going to get 24. Now we're on check. We're going to check to make sure that that number is smaller than that one. It is. So we're good. Check. Now we're going to bring down. We got something to bring down. We're going to bring down 240. Okay? Now once again, use your rounding rules. These are already nice whole numbers for me. So I got 30 and 240. Eliminate those zeros. How many times will 3 go into 24? We'll go in 8 times. Then we multiply around. It terminates. Okay? All right. We're going to do one more right here. Hopefully you have room. I'm just going to kind of fit it in. I apologize if you don't. We're going to need that room down there for those, so don't write down there. Okay, we'll do this number 4 next. So again, I'm going to do it over here. 329 divided by 14. Oh, by the way, speaking of this question up here, could I have just eliminated those zeros right from the beginning? Yes, I could have. Anytime you have zeros on both, you can just get rid of them. Okay? And then it'll be the same answer when you're dividing. When you're multiplying, you got to add those zeros back on, but when you're dividing, they're just think about this. 3 is going to go into 144 the same amount of times. 30 is going to go into 1,440. Okay, so now going down to this one. So 14 can't go into 3. It can go into 32. And again, you can use your rounding rules. 14 is really close to 10. 30 is really close to, or 32 is really close to 30. So I know 10 goes into 33 times. Now, if I did this, don't write this. If I did think it was 3, and I multiplied this around, and then I carried, that'd be 4, I get 42. I'm getting something larger than I started with. So that would tell me, oh, okay, well, it must not go in 3 times. It must only go in there 2 times. Okay, so, sorry, I'm waiting for that to disappear. There we go. That's going to go in 2 times. Now we're going to multiply around. We're going to subtract to get 4. Okay, you got to check, do the check step to make sure it's smaller than the divisor. It is. Now we're going to bring down that 9. Okay. Okay, now we bring down the 9. 14 goes into 49. Again, it's really close to 10. That's really close to 50. You can try 5. Okay, and try 14 times 5, 14 times 4. Okay, it's going to be 4 on this one. Okay, and that's going to be, or no, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. So let's say you did think it was 4, and you got 56. Again, you got something larger. So that should be a good indication of that number is going to have to go down. It's going to this number right here is going to have to go to 3. Sorry, it's so slow right now. Okay, so it's going to be 3, and that is going to be 42. Okay, now let's talk about this situation, because this is a little bit different of a situation. We've got to make sure we got this down. You just can't stop and say 23 or 23 or 7 or something like that. That isn't going to work anymore. We're off that. Okay, this is where we're really going to get into this down here. We've got to be able to extend this problem. And the only way I can extend it without changing my dividend, I just can't add zeros to the end of that, because the problem is 329 isn't the same number as 3,290. But if I add a 0 there, then it is the same. The big key with this is you have to put your decimal straight up, which we'll talk about down here. If you put a decimal in your dividend, it has to go straight up into the quotient. That's why it's very important to keep everything real organized like that. Okay? So now 14 goes into 70. It's going to go in there 5 times. And then we multiply around and we end up getting 70 minus 70, and it's done. It terminates. So we did all the same steps. We just had to add a decimal and 0 and extend the problem out to the decimals. So let's get rid of all this. Let's go down here because those are the relatively supposed to be the easy ones. So I'm going to go down here and do some of these. Okay. Once again, I tried to give you space, but I know that I didn't do the best job giving you a great amount of space. So I'm going to go ahead and write does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers again. It's just this little mnemonic device for us to help us remember what steps to do. Now, here's the big thing. When you're doing long division, guys, you cannot have a decimal divisor. Okay, I'm going to say that again. I'll write it. I'll say it like this. Divisor, this is very important. Divisor can't be a decimal. Can't have it. It can't be a decimal. Ever, ever, ever. Okay? So you have to take steps to make it not a decimal. Now, the first thing you got to know in order to be able to do this is you got to realize, well, which one is the divisor? Well, I've went over that pretty heavily. Hopefully you do now. The dividend is always going to be your first number. So if I have this, and you can write this somewhere if this helps you, the dividend is the first number being divided, and then the one that's doing the dividing is called the divisor. So that means that on all these, this number right here can't be a decimal. Can't be a decimal. Can't be a decimal. Can't be a decimal. Okay? So here's what we have to do. Okay? We have to somehow make this into a whole number. Now I'm going to show you how to do it, and it's going to seem really confusing at first, and then you guys can go, oh, okay, that actually isn't too terribly bad. Watch what I do here. I'm going to take that decimal, and I'm going to move it over to here, making this 42. Okay? Now I'll talk about it more in a minute. Now, because reasons that I'm going to give you here in just a minute, if you move that one place to the right, you have to do the same thing to your dividend. So now this is going to become 142.8. Okay? Now, a couple of the big mistakes. Don't write this. A couple of the big mistakes that I see students making. Do not write this because you're not going to have enough room to put anything else. Okay? When I gave them this right here, a lot of my students in the past, they say, oh yeah, Mr. Garrison said none of them can be decimal. So they go, I'm going to make that there, that there. I'm going to be doing 1,428 divided by 42. That is incorrect. Okay? Cannot do that. All right? It's all about how many places you are moving the decimal. Now I'm going to give you the reasoning behind this, and hopefully this actually makes sense. Do not write this either. Do not write this. Just watch. I mean, if you want to write it, you can, but I want you to have space for your division. Okay? If I gave you this, if I said that 1/2, and I said, is that equal to 4/8? You guys would all say, yes. Those are equal to each other. Because that's the same thing. One's just simplified. Well, it's true, but do you agree that I multiplied the top or in the bottom by the same number? Yep, sure. Just like if I'm simplifying a fraction like 6/8, and I divide 2, that gives me an equivalent fraction, which would be 3/4. That's why these and this are absolutely equal. They're the same thing, right? So as long as you're multiplying or dividing to both the top and the bottom by the same number, you can have a fraction stay equivalent. So now, let's show you why this works, because I don't like just teaching you tricks. I like to teach you the reasons why. Again, you don't have to write this. I just want you to watch. We know that all fractions are, hopefully you all just said division problems, because that's the way I've taught you to do it. All fractions are division problems. So let's go the other way and say, well then, if all fractions are division problems, then do you agree that all division problems are also fractions? So to speak, yes. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Don't write this. So could I technically write this division problem up there like this. Hopefully you're all saying absolutely, because Mr. Garrison, you told me that if I have the fraction 2/3, then I know that that's just 2 divided by 3. Yeah, absolutely. Top number divided by bottom number. All fractions are division problems, therefore all division problems are also fractions. Now some of you might be saying, "Oh, wait a minute here. You can't have decimals and fractions." You can't. That's the unrealistic part of this, the way I'm teaching this. But it's going to make sense here in a minute. So let me go back to what we did. What we did is we took this and we made this 42. So I want you to ask yourself real quick, what did I do to 4.2 to make it become 42? If you don't know, you've forgotten that little rule that I taught you on review sheet, one of the early review sheets, okay, that says if you're ever just moving the decimal, like for instance, if I had 3.75 and I multiply it by 100, remember, if I'm multiplying by a 1 followed by zeros, I can just move the decimal however many zeros there are to the right. So I know the answer to this is 375. I know that the answer to 2.9 times 10 is 29, because the decimal just moves 1 because 1, 0. Well, that's what we're doing, times 10. Now, we just talked about how fractions, as long as you do the same thing, multiplication or division, to the top and the bottom, then they're going to stay equal. The problem's not going to change itself. So basically what I'm telling you is, as long as you take this and multiply this by 10, you're all good. It doesn't matter. 142.8. Decimal moved one place because of 1, 0. Has everybody got that? So I'm going to erase this now, and we'll bring it back up here in a little bit. Now I'm going to go up here and I'm going to show you something on this question up here, if I can figure out how to get my, okay, I'll go back up to here now. Okay, disregard that these things are all written over top of this. Remember this question right here? That's just the fraction 1,440 over 30. And remember how I told you you can take those zeros off? Well, are those equal to each other? Did I do the same to the top that I did to the bottom? Yeah, I'm dividing by 10. Dividing by 10. You might ask, how did you know you were dividing? Well, because I know that if I move the decimal to the left, I'm going to be dividing. Multiplication, the decimal is moving to the right. When I'm dividing, it's going to be moving to the left. So if I took that decimal, just went boop there and boop there, that's how I got that. It's going to be an equal answer. It doesn't matter whether you divide 1,440 divided by 30 or you're doing 144 divided by 3, because you created an equivalent fraction there. Okay, so let's go back down. All right, so here we are. I've went ahead and I made, let me get that thing lined up. Oop, it was about right there, I think. One more. I went ahead and I know that my divisor cannot be a decimal, so I took care of it. I made it 42, which meant I multiplied it by 10, which meant I needed to multiply this by 10. So the real problem that I'm going to be doing is 142.8, and I'm going to be dividing that by 42. Now, as far as this, the DMSCB, does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? That doesn't change at all. The only thing you have to be aware of is if you have a decimal point, the decimal's got to go straight up there. It's got to go straight up. Okay? So now we're ready to get rolling on this. Here we go again. 42 can't go into 1. 42 can't go into 14. 42 can go into 142. Now, maybe you have to do your rounding rules again. Remember, 42 and 142. I would say that 42 is really close to 40. 140 is really close, 142 is really close to 140. Take those zeros off. How many times will 4 go into 14? It'll go in 3 times. So that's where I would start. I would say, okay, I'm going to try 3. Okay, then you might have to come up here. You might have to do 42 times 3 to figure that out. I'm going to get 126. That was my multiply step. Now I'm on the cell step, which is subtract. I'm going to subtract these. You might have to borrow and do these things inside of there. That's fine. You end up getting 16. Okay, so now we check to make sure that this number is smaller than my divisor. It is. Now we're ready to B, which is bring down. You don't have to bring the decimal down. All that decimal does is tell us where to put it in the quotient, the answer to the division problem. Now here we go again. We got 42. We already said that was close to 40. 168 is really close to 170, which we can get rid of the 0. 4 goes into 17 6 times, so we can try that. Again, we could go over and we could do 42 times 6 over here. 200. Whoa, why did I do times 6? I meant 4. I don't know. I didn't mean to write that. I'm very sorry, guys. Hopefully that didn't confuse you. My bad. Okay, let me erase. If it'll let me, please. Yep. Okay. So here's my eraser. So let me get rid of this 6 right there. Okay. All right. So anyway, I meant 4. I don't know why I said 6 or said 4, wrote 6. I don't know what I said. Anyway. Okay. So 2 times 4 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. There we go. We end up getting 168. There's our 0. Our answer is 3.4. We could continue to bring down these if we wanted to, but again, it's unnecessary, right? Unnecessary. Okay. Let's do the next one. Do this one over here. First thing that you should all realize is that this thing will become a little bit smaller. Please work. This thing's really slow. Wow. Okay, sorry about that. So, it comes back to this sentence that has kind of been erased, but your divisor can't be a decimal. Okay? Can't be a decimal. So, this right here is my divisor. So, I've got to go ahead and I've got to make it into a whole number. So, we're going to go ahead and move the decimal 2 places. You guys should already be making the connection that this is going to be multiplied by 100. That's how how 4.83 becomes 483. So the new problem I'm going to be doing is going to have a divisor of 483. Well, if you do 2 places and multiply by 100 to that, you have to do it to that as well. So that's going to become 18.3. Oops. Just said it and I wrote the wrong thing. Okay, it's going to become 1,835.4. Okay, because we're moving that decimal. So that's all that changed. The numbers don't change. Nothing changes. Do the same thing. Once again, you don't have to write this. I'm just showing you that if I wrote 18.354 divided by 4.83 as a fraction, because all fractions are division problems and all division problems are fractions, if I'm going to go ahead and make an equivalent fraction, I just got to make sure that I do whatever I did to the bottom, I got to do that same thing to the top. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Okay? Now we're ready to do our division. Hopefully you have a little bit of room. You could squeeze it in over here. I'm sorry, like I said, I didn't give you enough room probably. But I'm going to do it down here. So 1835.4. And we're going to be dividing that by 483. Decimal right away, take it straight up. Very important that we do that. Okay, got to make sure we're doing that because that's the whole point of it. 483 into 1, no. 483 into 8, no. 483 into 183, no. And then 483 into that big number, 1,835. This would be a perfect example of when you should use your rounding rules. Okay, and you don't have to. I mean, you could pick 480. You know, you could pick a lot of things. I'm just going to go ahead and pick 500, and then I'm going to go here and I'm going to pick 2,000. I'm just going to round it real nice and easy. So then I can get rid of 2 of those zeros. How many times will 5 go into 20? Well, you said 4. So that just gets me a start. That just gets me thinking that, okay, this number right here is going to be somewhere around 4, 5, something like that. So then we can go up and we can do 483 times 5. It's going to give us 15, 41, 24. You can see it went way over. So I know that it can't be 5, so now we got to try again. So I'm going to try 4 now. 483 times 4 to 19, 1,932. Again, 4 is just too big because you couldn't take that number right there from that. So I know now it must be 3. Okay, now I'm going to multiply that around, and that's going to give me that right there. I'm going to subtract this. Like I said, you might have to do your borrows and all that. Okay, so we can do that inside of here. I know that can't take 9 from 5, so I'm going to have to borrow 1 there. It's going to become 15. Minus 9 is 6. Again, can't take 4 from 2, so we're going to have to borrow, make that 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. 7 minus 4 is 3. Now we got to check to make sure it's smaller than my divisor. It is. I'm ready to bring down my 4. And again, I got another just monster number here that I got to mess with, and that makes it a little bit challenging because it's just big numbers, not very helpful numbers. So again, just to get an idea, we'll make that really close to 500, and then that would be really close to 4,000. So we're dealing with 500 and we're dealing with 4,000. Get rid of 2 of those zeros. 5 goes into 48 times. Okay, and then we could go ahead and do the 8 there. We can look 483 times 8. 8 times 3 is 24. 64, 66, 32, 38, and we actually get that number right there. So it would be 8, and then it does terminate as well there. It just stops right there. But the key is that decimal going straight up. Okay. All right. We'll do We'll do one more here. Again, I know that I've got to make this into a whole number, so it's going to go there, which makes this go 2 places. Times 100 times 100. So the problem we're going to be doing is 7,025.1 divided by 345. Okay. The decimals got to go straight up. 345 won't go into 7, won't go into 70. It will go into 702. Based on my rounding that I'm doing in my head, I'm just kind of thinking that it's got to be around 2 times, so I'm going to put a 2 right above that 2, though, because I would need 2 placeholders there. It's very important to be neat. Okay, and when I multiply that around, I get 690. I'm going to subtract this now. 2 minus 0 is 2. I've got to borrow here, and I end up getting 12. Make sure it's smaller. Obviously it is. Now we're on to 125. Okay. Can 345 go into 125? No, it cannot. So that's going to be 0. I'm going to subtract. You still got to do it, though. You have to say it goes in 0 times. Now we're going to bring down a 1. Okay. I'm going to guess that maybe 345, using rounding again, I'm going to guess maybe 4 times. Let's check it. 16, 18, 13. Okay, obviously it's not 4 because it went over, so it must be 3. Okay, so I'm going to do 345 times 3. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13, and then 10. There we go. That is the right one. It's 1,035. I'm going to subtract there, and I'm going to get 226. Okay. Now, what do we do at this step now? Well, just like we did up in that one above, we've got to add a 0 and bring it down. Okay? So now we're going to start the process over every single time. All right? Like I said, some of these numbers get pretty messy, so it takes a lot of work. I mean, it's not that it's hard. It's just there's so many steps and so many little things that could mess with you. Just keep that in mind as you're going through here. But as long as you got the process and you got the idea of making the divisor into a whole number and then moving the decimal that same amount of spots in your dividend, you'll be fine. Like this one would be, move it 2 places there, so we've got to move it 2 places there. All right, guys. Sorry, this one was a little longer.